Could I ask, because that in hindsight is such an iconic marketing play, was that planned? Cool. Well, today I'm joined by Matt, co-founder of Pure Pet Food, and also Joe, growth director. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, cheers.
Coming down all the way from Leeds as well for the episode, and I think it's a bit of a unique one actually, because I think we technically met through the podcast, didn't we?
Yeah. We were just saying actually, I think because we're in Leeds, we try to keep as close as we can to kind of like the London startup scale up scene, which in the UK is where it's happening. And I think all of us, or there's a couple of us at least, who spend a lot of time on podcasts and searching companies that we like and listening to episodes. And I think it was by luck that we found you that way, and then went a little bit deeper, and then we were chatting to each other, and I know Joe really liked a lot of the episodes, and that kind of led us to you. Yeah, clearly the podcast works. Keep going.
Yeah, we've been listening for a good 9 months now.
Yeah,
That's amazing. No, I appreciate that. I think, it's like, for us, it's relationship building more than anything. Like if something else comes off the back of that, great. But obviously we've been working together now for about just 6 weeks.
6 weeks, 2 months.
Yeah. So on creative, which has been really exciting. I think genuinely, when you guys reached out, I already knew who you were. I think we can get into that in a little bit more detail. But I think what you've created in the kind of pet food space and D2C space specifically, and your unique approach is really, really interesting. Obviously, raised some money from VCs recently as well. So we'd love to tap into that in a little bit more depth. But I think it's pretty incredible what you guys have done and the growth that you've had, especially since, as we spoke about before we started the episode, since you were on Dragon's Den. God, that's what, 10 years ago now?
A lifetime ago, basically. Yeah.
looking very fresh faced at the time.
Yeah. I haven't aged a bit.
That's what startup land does to you, isn't it? Matt, how's the wedding first? Let's get into that.
It was brilliant. Yeah, it was. Joe was there as well. I would say it was better than what I expected, and I expected a lot of it. And an emotional roller coaster. I think that speech was the hardest speech I've ever done in my life. I think.
I've never seen you so emotional.
I'm not an emotional person, so like,
I
actually just couldn't look at my wife when I was saying the speech. So it was like, I think that would made it quite endearing though. People like kind of gave me good feedback at the end of it. But yeah, it was. They always say it's your best day of your life, and I think if you go in thinking that it almost has a risk of not being. But actually, it kind of superseded what I even thought it was going to be. So we were dead happy with it. Yeah.
Any tips?
Thank you.
Because I was engaged earlier this year, so that's something we're starting to prepare for now.
I would say like me and Jem are quite relaxed people, and I think we were speaking to like we had a videographer on the day and a photographer, and they were saying sometimes, especially like the bride on the day can be so stressed that they actually end up having a really bad day because they're over worrying about every single little detail. And the thing that Jem's really good at, and I'm good at as well, is just focus on you two of having a good day, and you've got all your friends and family around that you realise there's only a few moments in life when everyone's really happy. It's a really joyous occasion. So like kind of just embrace all that and don't worry that the band hadn't started playing this very second or whatever, like I'd say focus on that.
Yeah.
It harks back to a bit how Matt treats work. It's always been let the experts do the expert job. Same with the wedding. My wedding was similar. You just let people that know what they're doing get on with it behind the scenes and don't think about it. It seems to work out all right.
Yeah. But no, you'll have a great time. You'll love it. Yeah, I'm sure you will.
Yeah, shaky legs.
Yeah. I was actually
sweaty hands.
I was really like, I'm not that much of a nervous person, but I was so nervous about like what the aisle when you turn around and your wife's walking down like that. That is difficult to try and like hold yourself back. And if you're even slightly an emotional person, you'll probably go. So yeah, be prepared for that.
I am. Anyway, let's dive into a bit of the origin story of the brand starting. I know Joe, you were one of the first employees.
Yeah, employee number 2.
Amazing. So let's start back at the at the start, and we can then dive into some of those other areas that we discussed at a later point.
Yeah. Well, there's probably a little bit I'll say in the early stage where there was a few years of where it was me and Dan, the founder, and then we'll jump to when Joe came on, because that's when the business really scaled. There's probably some fairly hard grind before, which is, it'll be interesting in itself.
Scrappiness.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, how did the brand come about?
So me and Dad are from a small town called Halifax, just outside of Leeds. I think both of us, through different paths, we've actually grown up together. So my younger brother is Dan's best friend. We've all grown up together. We live 2 doors down from each other. And I wouldn't say there's been any real inspiration in terms of like a person or someone around us, but we both had the same view on life, that for whatever reason, we didn't want to work for other people. We kind of wanted to set up our own thing. And we started really early and failed in a couple of businesses. I would call them learnings, but definitely failed. And actually then started to realize we need to do something that goes beyond just trying to make money, because we wanted to set up a business. And actually you realize, because it's so hard to get going, you have to actually care about what you're doing. So we went on a bit of a journey, and I've always been one of these people who I like to research like trends. I've just had a genuine interest in it. And I was always looking at like what's going on in America, what's going on in Europe, what sort of categories. We've both always been into health. We've both had animals growing up. You know, we've kind of been in similar sort of places throughout life, and actually just started researching different sort of concepts and ideas. And we looked at loads of different categories. We looked at supplements, we looked at all sorts, and we actually looked at pet, and it was genuinely like a common sense approach to it. And I actually think being naive is a really strong thing. And I think you don't realize how not knowing something is really good. So we looked at pet food. I mean, you look on a shelf, it's full of these weird things that say chicken and vegetable, and then you open it up and it's a load of biscuits. And if like you were to go home to your fiance and she said you're having spaghetti bolognese tonight and you got a plate of biscuits, you'd kind of wonder what that was. And we started to then do the research and like, how is that made? And we actually had a pet food factory at the top of the hill where we grew up, and it used to absolutely stink if the wind was blowing the wrong way. So dug into like all of like how it's made, and you realize quite quickly it's a byproduct of human food. It's not been around for that long, but basically it was, what do you do with this waste product? They put it through an extrusion process, which I think as years have gone on, people have started to understand that heavily processed is not good. They turn it into this biscuit form, and then that gets sold on the shelves with loads of like additives, preservatives to make it tasty. So we started looking at that and thought, that clearly is not healthy for a dog. And then when you look at the research behind it, you see obesity has gone up, cancer rates have gone up. So just like humans, unhealthier with like feeding processed food was the clear correlation. And then back then, this was like 10, 11 years ago, saw that there was like an emergence of this like raw food, and people were like defrosting meats. And I think we sort of had this thought of like, everyone surely didn't want to like defrost a chicken carcass every night and feed it to a dog. And although there's definitely going to be a market for that, and that is a really good way to feed an animal, is the different processes. And then started looking into like human food, started looking into subcategories, and saw that like there's this like army food, camping food, which is just air dried. You essentially remove the moisture. It means you need to put no process into it, and then you just send it out. And that was kind of like the aha moment of like, actually, why is this not done in pet? This makes sense. We then started looking globally, saw that there was people doing it in the US, and then thought, actually, can you get this over into Europe and into the UK? And this was all literally from Dan's mom's spare room, like no understanding of how to manufacture, how to build a website, like just this kind of like inner belief of like, we'll make it work. And then that was the starting process. We managed to get a regulation passed to say that we could sell what was then kind of like an air dried concept of food in Europe. But then we actually didn't know that there was a world, and I actually think this is a real positive now, but we didn't know there was a world where you could go and speak to people who'd manufacture stuff for you. We just presumed we had to manufacture it ourselves. So we bought an air drying machine off Amazon for like £100 and put it in Dan's mom's kitchen, and genuinely thought we were going to run it from a kitchen. And Dan, who's like the, I would say, financial kind of like, is like the person who will operate and scale. I'm probably more of like the ideas salesperson. We work really well together. But he calculated how many air drying machines he could fit in his cellar and like what that would get us to. So we realized pretty quickly that when we got audited and was told like, if you ever tried to sell this to the public, it's got all this like risk of bacteria and stuff. So we're like, we need to find a different way. And actually, and this was probably one of the hardest moments at the time. So we had no money. We were doing the most horrible job you can imagine, where we were trying to put money into this pet food business that we really believed in, but we had no money. We didn't have family money. We got a Calderdale Council grant for £300, which doesn't obviously get you far. We were doing cold calling for financial services businesses, and every person we rang, so we rang 150 people a day. Every person that we set up for a meeting about pensions, which you can imagine how the response you get when you ask someone if they would like that, we would get paid £150. So we'd both try and get 2 a day. And if we did that, we'd have to call usually 150 people. We could then focus on doing the pet food. And it was actually, Dan was going through one of those lists and was like, they look like they make air-dried food, not pet food. Let's go down and speak to them about actually making us pet food rather than do they want a conversation about a pension? So we went down, got mega lucky. There was this small unit in Halifax who were making air-dried products for human chains, like for NHS, for like supplements and, like the cereal bars, those types of things. We told them what we wanted to do and they were like, we think we can probably help you do this. And I think we spent £300 on our first manufacturing run, put it in the boot of my car. My brother had moved to London at that point, put it in the bedroom. And that was our first manufacturing run. And then we started to find people to build the website, et cetera, et cetera. But that was kind of then the point of actually we've got a business. So that's probably a very long-winded way of saying how we got there.
I love it. It's like that scrappy entrepreneurial spirit, isn't it? Like, you find a way to make it happen. But that's interesting because it doesn't sound like the most straightforward process to go through.
Not at all, yeah.
Not like starting a clothing brand where there's thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of suppliers all over the world that can supply that to you, and something that hadn't been done yet in the vertical. I mean, I'd love to just to touch on like what was the state of the pet market at that time, because I feel like although and this sounds weird to say, but it feels like you were very early in many ways. I look at like as we discussed before we started, this. If I look at this niche now, it is absolutely exploded and continued to explode. I think we definitely follow behind America, and just seeing how much people are spending on their pets nowadays. Talk a bit about that and the state of the market versus now.
I think I can probably give a much better understanding and explanation of it right now. I think when we were doing it, to be totally honest, again, that naivety, we realized it was a unique idea, and I used to always give ideas to Dan, and he'd basically tell me if it was a bad idea or not. And,
he's the filter.
Still do.
And I basically said, I told him the idea, and he actually, because I used to email him, and he actually came back and was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. And so it made common sense that actually this convenient way to feed a healthy food, if we could do a job of educating it, we've probably got a chance. But the state of the market then, I would say, was, like you've said, very early. I remember we paid to go to like one of these kind of like industry events where you go and like you talk to suppliers and you talk to potential retailers. And at that time, we didn't realize we were going to go into this D2C world. And we won like innovation awards. We thought we're clearly onto something, but there's something that's gone on, which I'm sure you've probably seen, but it's become bigger and bigger, I think, as we've gone through and like life's got more expensive, or at least it definitely feels like that. People are kind of like putting off children later. I know me and my wife are like this, where we've not had children yet, but we've got a dog instead that we treat probably better than most people's children. And
that's a big statement.
He's not lying.
I think that trend is kind of like definitely been accelerated throughout the years. Back then, there was definitely something there, but I wouldn't been able to tell you at the time it was going to turn out like it did. So it was very early, to be honest. And I think it wasn't until probably about 2014, 15, the early kind of D2C, early adopter businesses like your Tails.com started to come into the market. And that sort of, I think, bubbled up around kind of like the investment community and probably people who were kind of like operators and understand how to scale D2C businesses all of a sudden started to see this as like a hot category to get into. They could see the trends of humanization of pet, people, there's some interesting stats that people in a time when they lose income, the dog is usually the last one to go in terms of dropping that spend. They will sacrifice themselves. And I think don't quote me exactly on this, but there's a stat that like your child up until something like 18 months is number one, but then actually becomes number two in terms of like what you will drop on spend. So all those things were going on. And then I think, and again, I wouldn't be able to say what these words were at the time, but people clearly who understood the market as it started to develop could see that, there's really good unit economics in pet. And if you can obviously get the right product at the right price, all those things. So I think that became attractive for both people starting pet businesses and also the wider investment community. And it's been the last, I would say, what would you say, 3, 4, 5 years, something like that, where it's all of a sudden become this like really hot category to be in.
Yeah. Probably since
it's become become sexy, hasn't it?
Yeah. Lockdown definitely was a massive growth point for pet, especially pet online, because obviously everyone got dogs at the beginning of lockdown, Matt included. But it was like obviously when everyone knew we were locking down, everyone went straight to the local breeder and got a dog. The growth in pet was huge there.
Yeah. So it's turned into, like you said, like a quote unquote sexy category, and I think people think this is a really interesting category. I've even heard you guys speak about if you were going to start up a D2C business, it'd be in, I think you either said health or pet, and there's all the trends that you see going on in humans, they're going on in pet as well, just in a slightly different way, but it leads to loads of opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. I think just as humans, we've become more conscious of, what we're consuming and what those around us are consuming, whether that be pets or, siblings or kids. And that those trends play through to pets 100%. I want to take this in chronological order then. I mean, because I assume it was almost pre-inflection point with you going on Dragon's Den, and I want to touch on that first to make sure before we kind of hit that big point of growth. But I think it was quite an iconic episode in many ways for context. Dan was eating the pet food on the episode. I think Peter called him out and asked him to try it and put the food where his mouth is. Better pardon. Talk a bit about that and that journey of going on the show and whether that helped in any way, kind of put you guys on the map.
Yeah. Well, I'll say a few of the tactics that got us there as well behind that. So we managed to get it to. And Dragon's Den was part of this, but we managed to scale it up to around 1 million. But pre that, we were completely hand to mouth. So we had no avenue to say, let's put 10 grand into meta ads. And we wouldn't even, if I'm honest, have the capability to do it at that stage. We were kind of like just hand to mouth playing around. We'd boost a few posts in meta, etc. And one of the things that we realized quite early when you had no money that actually got you a little bit of traction was enter as many events as possible. So we would turn up to the opening of, an envelope, a bit of a letter. It'd be literally any event we could enter, a regional startup event, anything, we'd enter it. And we'd usually actually do pretty well. And we managed to win a few of these events, and we won like a national event, and we got a grant off the back of it. And so that was a strategy that worked quite well. But then clearly, because at the time we were both discussing saying we need to find a way of actually getting in front of a wide audience. Let's apply to Dragon's Den. And as we were applying, the directors clearly look at like a lot of these like events and like startup events that people have, a competition, and look at the winners and then just ring them. So we actually got a call from Dragon's Den saying, would you want to be on it? As we were thinking about being on it. And I think we'd literally sent the letter application that day. And we were like, how do you know? And they were kind of, oh no, we've just seen that you've won one of these competitions. So we then agreed to go on it, got through all the process. And I think, to be totally honest, we were so young that we weren't kind of like worried about the outcome. We'd really, both me and Dan, although very different characters, are quite kind of like, in very different ways, quite methodical in how we think. So we thought about every question they could think of asking, and we had each other had the responses, like if they ask that, I'll answer. If they ask that, I'll answer. So we'd really got to grips with like the business. So we weren't worried about any sort of question to catch us out. And then we went on there. I mean, I can probably share a little bit, but it's like a full 12 hours of a day. You know, we had to get there really early, sat in a green room. You can't see the dragons. Like someone follows you everywhere that you go, so you don't cross paths, all that sort of stuff. And it was a bit of an eye opener because you're in with businesses who are like, this is our last chance saloon before like we're going to go under. I remember speaking to a couple. I won't say the business, but they were literally like hysterical because they'd like put the mortgage on the line, and you're thinking, oh my God, you know, like you're making me nervous. You know, like at this point, it's kind of like for us, it's just all upside. You know, we're young, we've got nothing to lose. So we then went in and went into the kind of like do the pitch, and it is definitely kind of a bit of, they make it purposefully scary. So you walk in, there's people staring at you both sides, all the lights are shining on you, and you have to walk to this spot and then say the pitch.
It's not actually a lift, is it, either?
The lift doesn't exist. Yeah. You have to pretend to look up and down, all that sort of stuff. But then once you've done that pitch, you kind of just, you end up phasing everything out around you. You phase all these cameras pointing at you, and you realise you're just in a conversation because they edit it down to kind of like, I think you get like a 5-minute slot, maybe 10 minutes tops. But you're in there for an hour, and I think we were in there for well over an hour. But they start asking you questions, and as soon as you get into that, you start to feel comfortable, but you can tell that they've not been told what the business is. So at first they're trying to work out, because they obviously throw in a few like joke businesses to kind of like, not to discredit anyone's business, but they definitely do throw in a few to like, for them to, you know, do the whole ripping them apart and all that sort of stuff. But they're trying to figure that out quite early. And luckily, one of the dragons, Deborah Meaden, knew the category and actually said, this is an interesting business, actually. I could see this has got potential. And that kind of turned it. And they obviously had the moment, which is still featured in most of our, up until the last few months has been in a lot of our ads. They had the moment where they asked Dan to eat it, and Dan ate it on camera, which, you know, from a trust point of view, like you don't realise how valuable that is looking back. At the time, it just...
Could I ask, was that, because that in hindsight is such an iconic marketing play, was that planned?
They actually planned it for us.
Interesting.
So they didn't actually. What they said is, ask the dragons to eat it. So we were like, well, I think Dan said, will you eat it? Or something like that. Or would you like to give it a try?
I remember because Deborah then pulled this horrible face.
Yeah, would you like to give it a try? And I think, I can't remember how he worded it, but Peter Jones kind of said, well, put your money where your mouth is and you eat it type thing. And so then he ate it. But that kind of like clip itself has turned into like such a big trust point. And, you know, we still use it today in a lot of our comms. So that was a huge moment. And then from that point, the tide started to turn. All of a sudden, you know, we got given really nice feedback, and we got 2 offers. And I think we went into it, again, if I'm honest, completely with his eyes wide open. We realised if they were going to give us what we wanted, we were going to say yes. But actually, it was so early in the journey. We were a tiny business. We'd already done a good job of opening a lot of the doors. So this kind of promise that we're going to like do it all for you. And I think you've got to be, again, eyes wide open with this. Peter Jones ain't going to be in your office on Monday morning asking what he can do. You know, it's very much, you're going to get the money. You might get kind of like the odd bit of help and a few connections. But I think we just had the belief that we could do it. So we just thought, well, unless they give us what we want, we're going to say gracefully no. And to be honest, we came away from it. I remember walking out and it was like, that could not have gone any better. You know, we've nailed it. We've not been ripped to pieces. We've not been told that it's a stupid idea. They validated it. Like one of them said it was like the best pitch they've ever seen or something like that.
Yeah,
you know,
Duncan.
like, and then came away and thought, wow. And I remember it going live because you shoot it kind of like early in the year, and it was July, it went live, and it was like a sunny day. And I remember, because I hate watching myself back, both of us watched it by ourselves at the time we were both living with our parents, like watched it by ourselves. And then the second it went live, you could just see the counter. And right now, it actually probably won't even be a blip on a day of sales. But at the time, I was like, because at this point, we didn't have an office. I was printing out the orders in our home printer, running round to Danny's dad's garage, putting the labels on the boxes and driving them down to the post office. And I could see like the ticker of the sales just go, I'm thinking, holy shit, I'm going to be up all night here, you know, kind of like printing out orders. And we then just spent probably the next 2 weeks just frantically packing, and we couldn't pick up the phone. You know, we just had to turn the phone off. And, you know, you realise after that, we realised we had loads of people like trying to bang on his door for, you know, wanting to talk about investment and all, but we couldn't even literally pick up the phone. It took us probably a month to kind of like lift his heads up and and realized it was obviously a big thing for us. And it allowed us to start to get in the game and scale. You know, we actually, I think at the time, in sales, we made back what we asked for within probably a week, if that, you know. And at that point, when you two guys just sat at home with no cash at all of a sudden you had a bit of money to play with. And we then went on the journey of starting to learn how to scale it from having a little bit of cash, and started to learn about, you know, how we do this kind of e-commerce world and how we do online sales and all that sort of stuff. And then Doug went really deep into it, and that probably gets us to the next stage.
That's amazing. No, it's great to hear the impact, the initial impact, just to give it that nudge that it had. And I guess like that kind of takes us on, before we get into actually then you raising at a later stage. Joe, you coming into the journey then, we mentioned before we started that was a bit of an inflection point and a massive growth lever for the business. Let's talk a bit about that and your impact there.
Yeah. So I think from my understanding at least, there was a look around point of other online D2C businesses in pet starting to come around. And Matt and Dan always tell me that they were kind of, it was either get on the train or kind of grow really slowly. And it was seeing that like subscription's a thing in dog food now. Suddenly it wasn't a thing before, like Tails and Butternut came along and did subscription. It didn't exist before then. So they saw this kind of inflection point of like we should get on board this opportunity here. So then when I came on board, obviously it was still very early when you look at what we've done now. I had 6 months of a metal part of a kitchen sink as my desk, so it was a gamble, but it was fun, and that was the main point. But yeah, I was very much tasked with. So I whilst I'm the growth director now, I joined the business as a developer. So I was just a website developer at the time, did a bit of design and development, and they just said, can you build us a subscription first website? Again, like Matt says, like Matt and Dan aren't people that have historical careers or like skill background.
Essentially our first job.
Yeah.
So which is great for someone like me being able to come in, because they just back you and you get full reign to do what you think is best. So there's no like, they're not from a design background and saying, well, I know how to design, so this is the skills, or from even anything. So that when I come in and say, I think we should drop Shopify and do something custom and build something a bit special, they said go for it, which is what we did. And luckily it worked out really well, because it could have gone either way. But yeah, we launched the subscription first 2020, just before lockdown. And the kind of metrics turned overnight, retention doubled, and then lockdown hit, and that obviously grew the metrics further. But yeah, that was all just after the investment round.
Yeah, I think we got really lucky in our first hires, because as like Joe said, we didn't know what we didn't know, and I think both me and Dan have always been quite good at like going out and speaking to other businesses, and even going into the raise. People would be surprised, and maybe people aren't if they're in these communities already, but I was definitely surprised like how open people are to like help. So we spoke to a few businesses who were like turning over 20, 30 million, a bit in front of us, and well, a lot in front of us at the time, and had gone through rounds of venture, and we were kind of like, how do we even do this? And I remember him talking about unit economics and CAC to LTV and having to write it down and be like, what the hell does that actually mean? You know, like, and Dan, who actually qualified as an accountant, he trained himself going through the business, then went away and modeled it and was like, actually, we have a pretty good business, I think. You know, I've actually done this, and because at the time, and I mean, I don't even want to say what the CPAs were at the time, but I wish I knew what I knew now, because we should have absolutely flown, but we just didn't have a clue, and didn't know that, you know, there's like, I know you guys talk about like Wayflyer and ways in which you can like get revenue finance, no idea of any of that. So we were kind of like very hand to mouth. And then obviously did the raise, and that was literally by listening to people, putting together our own deck, go out, totally did it ourselves, didn't take any sort of corporate finance advice, anything like that. And then got really lucky with some of the first hires, and Joe being, you know, I've said this to Joe loads of times, but really lucky with bringing Joe into the business, who like has got that kind of self-starter mindset. Like I think, again, when you've not been in a work environment, you almost think that everyone has that mindset of like, there's a problem, I'll figure it out, I'll solve it, and I'll do it. Whereas you learn actually over the years as the business scales that not everyone's got that skill set. And I think we got super lucky with Joe where he'd come in, see an issue and just solve it and do it and tell you that he's done it. And I remember we were talking about it'd be really good to have data dashboards. Joe literally taught himself in a weekend how to build like actual proper like, Looker Studio kind of dashboards. And then here presto, we've got kind of like CAC to LTV and all these metrics that we compile because Joe's taught himself and almost took that for granted. And it were only years later when the team started getting bigger. You're like, hang on a minute, like that's not a normal thing, that, to be fair. And we got really super lucky that I think Joe was looking for a startup culture to get involved in and wanted to get his hands dirty. And it was just really lucky timing and an opportunity kind of met each other. And since then, we've always tried to find that skill set. And like Joe said, I don't know more about tech than Joe does, so I'm not going to tell him when he was obviously in that role. And have that same view on most areas. And I think if you find the right people and you give them the tools and the autonomy to do it, you usually get a good outcome.
I think that's a really interesting point when you mentioned that, Joe, as well, because I think it sounds obvious, but like, bringing people in, trusting them to do their job, giving them the empowerment to be able to do what they need to do and, really lean into their expertise. And I think you see it more often than not where founders aren't good at that. They're not good at delegating. They're not good at empowering their team to have ownership in what they need to achieve through that. And I think I've noticed that from us working with you guys on creative. There are times where we have brands that, they bring us in to do a job and any suggestion kind of gets shot down and isn't right. So I think that's a great thing for founders to learn from, because that's how you get the most out of people.
Yeah, I think so. I think I remember when me and Dan went through investment, we had is it called like a psychological assessment, and we both were very low on ego, and I think that's actually stood us in good stead that I don't need to be the one that's been seen as the person who's done X, Y, Z. I'm more than happy. In fact, I prefer the person who's in that team to have the limelight and give them the autonomy to go out and do it.
Yeah,
it's a true Yorkshire business.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So you touched on it there in terms of raising, but how many rounds have you gone through?
We've done technically 3, but I would call it 2 because the 2 of them with the same investor.
Okay.
And I think if you think about, and I'm sure you know about this from subscription world, there's a few factors that go on in terms of, it's essentially, and I wouldn't call it a race, but you're trying to build a business when you take on venture funding in different constraints for what you think about a traditional business. And I remember me and Danny, it was like a real kind of like mental shift where in the early days, you used to just running it from cash in the bank, profit and loss, very steady. You think how you think about a business. When you take on venture, you're trying to get, you have to accept this, that you're investors. And this doesn't mean that I want to leave the business as soon as we take on venture or anyone else does, but you have to accept that they are giving you money for equity, a valuation that you're not going to get from a local bank, but they are going to want an exit at some stage. So they want a disproportionate return at some stage. So the rules of the game almost change a little bit. And when we looked at our business, being, as Joe said, a subscription first business, you're also playing in a market where people are playing different games, and you've got, some massive competitors in our space who are raising huge amounts of money, who are buying market share and being in the auctions and pushing up the CPMs and the CPAs. And a meaning that if you want to play that game, first of all, you've got to do a really good job and think outside the box and do things differently. But secondly, when you play in a world where, it's a CAC to LTV and your CAC is not offsetting your first order, you're effectively not making money on that first order. So if you want to fuel it and you've got ambitions to grow it, you've got to take on venture funding, and you've got to have a real good understanding of what your cohorts look like, what your retention profile is. And then the levers to scale it are improve CPA, improve retention, think about your margin in between. But those are the 3 things. And how can we do a good job of all of those?
So yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like any advice for brands that are going through that right now? But I think what you broke down there is one, clear path to an exit, and really then breaking down those economics so they know they understand the scale that this can get to.
Yeah.
Anything outside of that?
I think you've got to have real clarity on what you want from the business. Do you want to be a command and control and own your own destiny and bootstrap? And that, for some verticals, can be done and is a really good path. And if you don't like having people in the business who are going to at times challenge you, it's probably not the right thing to do. Again, me and Dan, as I said, are both low ego. So we were quite comfortable of bringing people in, and that brings challenges, good and bad. But you've got to be really clear on where do you want to get the business? What does that look like? And you've got to be able to tell that story to people who are potentially going to put money in. And you've got to give a real clear understanding of like, why is this proposition better than the other 5, 50, 100 who've been talking to me in this sector? What's going to make you stand out? And we had a lot of those components without thinking that through when we first started the business. I would say by luck more than anything. But if I were going to do it again, I'd have a really clear view of, do I want to be in this as a lifestyle business? Do I want to be out of this in 10 years? And again, your personal is not always tied to the investor, but you've got to have a real clear understanding that investor has probably got a life cycle on that fund. They've probably got to get a return, and you've got to work it back because, maybe not to go into now, although I'm happy to, but it can also turn different. If you don't have a real clear view and you get into an investment, you can end up being in a worse position than taking the money. Doesn't mean you're going to be successful. It actually ups the risk, and it means that you can have a disproportionately good outcome, but you also increase your chances of potentially not having a good outcome. So you've got to really think that through.
Can also really change your behaviors if you think like when you go from being fully bootstrapped to suddenly this big cash injection, it suddenly changes the way you behave around the cash in the business and how you kind of are spending cash. I mean, how did you approach that with that first cash injection? Did you have a clear strategy of where that money was going and how were you going to use that? And I guess avoid wastage as well.
You feel free to jump in as well, John, this, but I think, again, we were so early, and you realize over time that sometimes like a gut feel is actually most of the time, if not every time, is the right thing. And I think we went through stages in the business of not quite fully understanding the paths that we wanted to go. And I think as the years have gone on, we're really confident in ourselves now. And we spend all of our time now, I say all of our time, a big part of our time speaking to others who are on the same journey and really understanding it. In the early days, I think we took on money, and actually the early investor, he messaged me recently from getting married. He kind of said to us, and I really like him for this. He was like, I remember seeing 2 guys in the shed in Halifax who've managed to get a business to $1 million. And I thought, they've managed to get a business to $1 million with no money. The kind of investment thesis was they probably will do all right if I give them some money. And it was no more. And he really took a chance on us. And I said how much I admire him for that.
Back the jockey, not the horse.
Yeah. But I think when we took the money on, it was almost we didn't really have a clear path. We had a very strong view of direct to subscription, but then how to scale it. I think we had a few bits of nuggets of ideas, but there wasn't a clear we are going to absolutely nail this. That's, I think you said it, but we were really early. We were early in a lot of ways. And we've, from not having jobs in an industry or being from a venture-backed world, didn't have that strategy. It's taken a few years for us to now, I think now if you asked us, we have a really clear focus on what we're going to do. But that's evolved over the years. So we probably we did definitely make some silly mistakes. And in hindsight, we'd never do them, but you live and learn. And I think that's been the big thing.
There's also a reality that tight Yorkshiremen, the purse strings are a lot tighter. I don't know the reality of this, but you hear a lot about some of the startups in London splashing pretty big cash on just life and offices and stuff like that. I mean, we moved office recently, and some of the discussions I was involved how can we spend £500 less on this sofa? And we've got millions of pounds in the bank, but we're a traditionally tight purse business that want to spend sensibly, and it's part of the DNA of the business. So I think part of the point of it all was to keep the DNA and not get away from that. But yeah, it's a different. I think we play differently up north.
Yeah, and I think the thinking is evolving as we're scaling.
Yeah,
but I think Joe's right. We've not come from that world, and sometimes you kind of, when you're in it, and we've immersed ourselves in it over the last few years, and you realise that there's definitely different games being played, and you know, the way that their playbook has played out is very different to how they've thought about, you know, what the use of cash and where they spend it. And yeah,
I think it comes down to ego, like as we've said earlier, like, you know, it makes for a great LinkedIn post to say we've just raised X amount of millions, and you know, a lot of founders, it's about status, and you know, it kind of ties back to some of those core human desires rather than using that as a vehicle to continue growing. So yeah, I think that's definitely served you, the fact that, you know, ego hasn't got in the way, and you're the same people as when you started the business as you are now at, you know, doing multiple 8 figures a year in run rate.
One of the things I remember Matt and Dan saying, which always sticks with me, is that sometimes you can raise too much money. I think again, it goes back to ego, where if you raise, the more you raise, the more the bigger the business has got to end up being. So sometimes you can just, if you raise a lot of money, it means your business you've got to get to a certain size before you can exit. Yeah. And it just makes life a lot harder on you. There's a lot more pressure because you've got to be huge. And sometimes you don't actually need, like sometimes you'll be pushed to raise more so that it can be a bigger business in the end. And I think there's a balance there.
And that's probably another good bit of advice, of like, be really intentional and prudence, probably the wrong word, but think about what the outcome's going to be, because actually, you know, you've seen lockdown was probably one of these, and there's businesses that I heard of and kind of secondhand knew where they raised massive money because consumer was absolutely flying. But you've got to remember that, for argument's sake, you raise 100 million. If that business then sells for 100 million, usually in that contract, the investor will get 100 million back and you will get nothing. So you've got to be really, really thoughtful around what do you actually need and what do you honestly think the outcome's going to be. Like, is it realistic to think if you sell, you know, I don't know, pick a category, but you're going to sell it for 5 billion when it's in a kind of like a commodities-based consumer product with no real USPs? Possibly not. So probably don't raise money with the expectation that that's where it's got to be. You know, have a think back of like, what is the outcome? And I think that's an important thing to do.
Yeah, I love that. I'd love to just, you know, it wouldn't be D2C Diaries without going a little bit into, you know, page strategy. I know when we first started talking and ahead of us working together, you kind of were touching on Meta as a channel, maybe struggling to like fully unlock the true potential of Meta this year. Can we touch on that and maybe like going into a little bit of what you've changed? I know you've restructured slightly internally in terms of, you know, the growth side as well. So yeah, it would be good to touch on that.
Yeah, so we've been doing Meta for a couple of years, I would say. We started probably more stronger on it. Maybe Jan 23 is when we started pushing a bit harder on it. Matt saw it really as a opportunity where I think part of the problem with Meta, when you have certain attribution models, is it looks like a very high CPA channel compared to Google, especially when you've got a product like ours, which is highly searched for. But Google works pretty well for us, and has always historically been a larger channel because people come looking for a solution for dog food. It's very common for people to Google what should I feed my dog with pancreatitis. It's much different to like what t-shirt do I wear. I mean, it's a searched for thing, which is great for us because it's cheap. But as we obviously start to grow, that search volume runs out. And you need to start driving awareness, and which we've tried to do, and we've had a few hits along the way. Like we did a founder ad last year, Jan 24. I think it's Jan 24 now. 24. I can't believe it's 25 now. But that did really, really well, and we really grew through it. But we didn't have any kind of strategy. We didn't know this thing people were doing of just running loads of ads. We'd seen it a bit, but hadn't managed to get backing internally to scale the team. So we weren't releasing loads of ads, and we didn't manage to scale that. Ad fatigued and growth slowed in that area. So we tried a few different things. Earlier this year, we tried a kind of a more old-fashioned way of doing things, where we'd use a large marketing agency. We had a more traditional kind of 2018, 2019 funnel through Meta of kind of your tofu, mofu, bofu stuff. And it just wasn't really working for us. CPAs were going up, growth was slowing. And we had a tough, for us, April to April. So Q1 for us was April to June, but it was pretty tough for us. So we made some changes and we decided to bring the kind of growth engine in-house, and we kind of backed ourselves to do it. That's when I moved from tech to growth with some internal restructure stuff. And that's when, obviously, we'd been listening to your podcast, which gave me and Matt had been listening to it for a few months at that point, and we were really keen on, we really backed Meta, and we talked to, I think in 7 days, we talked to 15 different people that we thought were experts, including you guys and some other founders of other businesses that are doing well, and some agencies, just loads of different people and we just got this real feeling of Meta is the answer here. We're not doing it right. It is, like everyone else, it's their biggest channel by far. For us, it was our third biggest channel at that point.
That's what I found crazy about when we spoke. Like you were at the scale you were without Meta, which just was like, for me, I just saw the money signs, because it's just in the sense of, there's just so much potential there and, nowhere near the ceiling. So the opportunity based on where you were able to get to without Meta as a primary channel, which is very rare in today's, D2C landscape, was pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, yeah, and everyone would tell us that, which is what this reason to believe really built up. And I think that's what was a big thing for us. We got this massive reason to believe. So when we kind of kicked off doing it, we brought the team built the team in-house to start making ads. We talked to you guys about kind of scaling that ad production. And I look back and a little bit it was luck, but we went out and filmed this ad at the Yorkshire show at the time, just a fairly simple street interview ad, and it absolutely demolished. It did really, really well. And it meant that 3 weeks after we launched this new strategy and way of doing things, we halved our CPA and 2.5x sales in 3 weeks. And then we just doubled spend in a week, just because we could, and it was there. We saw and it was fantastic. And that was 2.5 months ago now. We've had another hit recently with one of your guys' ads, the founder ad, and it's just scale is doing really, really well. It's we've definitely seen Meta's now our biggest channel. So it's been a real quick turnaround. Obviously, because of the scale, like you say, because of the scale we're at and the money we have in the bank, and when we were 30 mil run rate at the time of the change, and we're a bit more now, which is great. But when you're that scale and you turn things around that dramatically, you can really go at it. And we understand as a business, as long as your CPA is reasonable and we've got a bit of cash in the bank, we can spend and can just scale. We don't have to go off the budget we made 6 months ago, which is a change we've recently made, but it's been really useful when stuff goes well. So yeah, it's allowed us to really, really push on, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and I would add to that, the times I've seen, because we've got two really good, and we've got 3 performance channels, and we've got, I would say, the Meta side and the face-to-face side, which have kind of like been standouts for us. And the times when that has been done well is when we've had, I would call it like a bottom-up approach. I think it's so easy to go to be sold the dream and get this cookie cutter approach, but you realize you need to be from a bottom up, because the nuances are around, and you talk about this a lot, but what's your product market fit in that category? What are you trying to get across? And it always works when you get really in the weeds. And what Joe's probably not said, which Joe's been pivotal in this, is we've now got, the work has now gone in how we structure and think about creative testing, how we think about all the different propositions, how we think about the stages of the funnel, and all those things in terms of how we do it creatively. That's been the lever that's and like Joe said, we got lucky with a couple of unbelievable winners. Like you guys have got one of them, and the Yorkshire show one was almost too good to be true. But that came from intentionally. It wasn't luck.
Yeah.
It was actually the structure behind it. And I think we've got a structure now where the next big winner might come in 6 months or 6 weeks or 6 days, but the intention and the structure is behind it. So
could you talk a bit about that structure in terms of like how's your growth team set up internally now then?
Yeah, so we actually had some of the talent in-house already that we just repurposed a little bit. They were quite spread thin, doing a number of different things, affiliates and all that kind of thing. And I kind of just chopped a lot. When we changed, my strategy was simplify and focus. So we chopped a lot of channels that we were doing, and there was some interesting conversations internally of people saying, why would we stop doing that? That's going okay. But the focus was very much we should do less and we should do it really well. And
I love that, by the way.
That's a big thing for us. Yeah, it's really worked, but I think there was a lot of surprise that I came in and said we should do less, not more. So we repurposed a couple of people's roles. So we have a kind of a lead creative strategist who kind of runs the team, and she was doing a lot of it already, but just didn't have the remit to be able to perform how she wanted to. And then we have another creative strategist on board. We've just hired another one. Well, we're just in the process of hiring another one as well. So we will have 2 creative strategists and a lead running that team, working with some freelance video editors to prop up some skills that are needed to produce internally. And then we work with yourselves as well. So that like doubles up our internal resource. So we end up, currently we're making about 200 ads a month, but we want to scale that. Obviously it's difficult at our price point and CPA point that you can't make, I'm finding at least, I don't understand how we could make 1,000 ads a month, because I don't understand how we could spend enough in testing to test 1,000 ads a month at the moment without having ad sets with 30 ads in them, which you could do. So we have a kind of a pretty basic, like everyone suggests, a testing campaign and a scaling campaign. Where testing, we just put money behind kind of ad sets where we give each ad set a certain amount of money each week and just scale the winners.
You're horizontally scaling?
Yeah, both. So we if it's under a certain CPA, we'll promote it, but also we'll scale it within the campaign as well. So we do both to try and make the most of it, because we did think about like turning it off and just putting it scaling, but I think if it's winning, you might as well spend on it. It's not harm. I don't particularly see loads of cannibalization of each other between the 2 campaigns. So I'm encouraging you just to spend until when the CPA goes up, then you turn it off. It's pretty straightforward. We've kept it really simple so that we can focus on the actual creative. I'm myself and the other lead creative strategists are doing the media buying, which is very much just feels like gambling at times. It's just turning stuff up and off when it reaches certain things. I think it could very much be automated at some point. It feels very, very, very straightforward. One of the things I like though of doing it, but obviously I kind of taught myself how to do it as we've gone along, because it's not particularly complicated. And I liked my theory is always I should know at least a bit how to do something before I get someone else to do a better job of it. That's just the way I work, where I want to know how to do everything that my team does, at least to a degree. And that helps my level of understanding of my advice giving, I find. So yeah, the media buying side it feels fairly straightforward. Keep it simple, and then the focus is on just go out and make as many good ads as you can, and we'll test them and find out how they do and keep them diverse. We tier them up. We have like tier 1, which is kind of your statics. Tier 2, which is UGC and kind of street interviews or stuff filmed on phones in the office. And then your tier 3, which is kind of your high production stuff. A lot of stuff you guys do. We've done some high production stuff in the past internally as well. And try and keep a blend between it to really create that diversity and force us to be as diverse as possible.
Yeah.
And that seems to be working pretty well for us. But again, it's fairly early for us. A lot of what we do is just from the people that we've talked to. We, like Matt says, part of the problem of us being up north is that we're not in a natural community of businesses doing a good job of stuff. So we've had to be really intentional of making friends, talking to people, and building our own communities to get and give advice to. Obviously, we do some stuff and have done some stuff really well, especially around the direct sales, face-to-face stuff. So we have done a lot of sharing of what works well for us in return for advice on sharing of what works for the people, and that is working. That works really well for us.
Yeah,
I love that. By the way, that you just how bullish you guys are. It's definitely see this trend with founders and just brands that we we either work with or get on the podcast, and just, you know, the ones that are just so bullish on just always being the students, I think are the ones that really win at the end of the day. Like, it's that idea of always learning from others, and you guys throughout the whole journey seems like you're so, you know, that's such an integral part of your strategy. Because it's, as you say, you know, we do that with the agency as well. People that are just further ahead than us that we can just learn from and just always be sponges. So I love to hear that. We've got about 15 minutes left. We talked about acquisition a bit there. I'd love to just touch briefly on retention. Obviously, you know, a lot of your enterprise value will come through the subscription model, LTV, things like that, I would assume. And I bet this has been an integral part of the growth of the business. What, you know, any tips there for brands that are looking to increase LTV or, you know, introduce subscription? What may be some of those bigger lever moves that you guys have done over the years that have really helped with that?
I'll say a little bit. Yeah. You jump in as well. I would again take it back to like first principles of kind of, we realized quite early is really understand the customer dynamics in dog food. And we actually kind of had a very early stage of cat food and came out of it because when we were trying too much too quickly, because we understood the dynamic, we started to understand the dynamics of that category. But in dog, typically a consumer wants the best for the dog, first of all, but will want to try a food, will not want to kind of risk the house on kind of like saying, I'm going to spend £100 up front because I get a better deal. They're going to want to spend a fairly low-ish amount to be able to try a product. And then once they've done that, they will then buy big. So to understand that, so we, for example, know that, but there's an interesting point as well around take that kind of low amount to a point. If you're giving it away, you're going to get customers who are in that kind of like giveaway, throwaway mindset. And we've always seen the lower the AOV on the first order, the harm on retention. But then after that, think about your product and proposition and think about the mechanics behind it. So we now realize in our customer base, we've got some who want to do it every month. We've got some who want to do it every 8 weeks. We've got some who want to do it every 12 weeks. And that giving those options massively improve retention. And this is obviously away from all the product NPD stuff, but that just giving those options, because understanding that you might run your finances differently to me, where I run it month to month and you just want to get the best deal and you're prepared to pay up front. Give all those different options will allow you to improve retention. And we've seen, you know, those bigger packs lead to better returning customers, etc.
The key is listening to the customer. At the end of the day, we do a lot of customer stuff. We're really big on that. We have a big post-purchase flow. I think part of it, because we've built all of our stuff ourselves, we have our own subscription platform. We have our own tech that runs our factory that we have ourselves. We are very vertical in the business. That we have a lot of our own stuff. It allows us to basically do any idea anyone has. We can do it. We don't even have to think about whether it's possible or not, which is fantastic. It means we have to have a decent sized development team, but it's really useful for stuff like this where you go, oh, there could be a retention play here. We do a lot of testing, so it means we've done like some really nice flows from after purchase to really make sure we've got a great post purchase journey. And we do a lot of asking customers questions and getting direct feedback, and then we pipe it all through into some custom dashboards that we just have on the wall in the office. So we've constantly got something a customer has said to us in the last 10 minutes is on the wall in the office at all times, and just we get everyone to really soak in that customer feedback and know what a customer actually believes. And two things we ask are, what made you purchase, why did you purchase today, and why nearly didn't you purchase today? And that second one is so useful for working out how to improve retention. Like what nearly stopped them from buying should be exactly for improving conversion rate, but also like what they're worried about, what concerns do you have, and same with like a cancellation process. Obviously, subscription cancellations is a really big part of it, and we've developed a way where we get free text inputs from people there. So that's, again, a bit of AI stuff there going on so we can summarize it, because a big part of cancellation flows is categorizing people into the right things so you can target them with the right messages to try and keep them. But we get free text, why are you stopping, for every single person that cancels their plan. And again, it's up on the wall. Yeah. We've got live tickers of this information about what people don't like about our product and our business, and fuels it back in straight into what to do next.
Yeah, and that's going deep on that. Basically, fuels our NPD pipeline. You know, knowing, for example, that price is a lever. Like, well, what can we do there? Knowing that some dogs don't like the food. Well, what is it about the food? And go deeper on that, and then that turns into a product pipeline. And that's the kind of, to Joe's point, just getting that feed. In the early days, and we still do now because I still think there's value in it. You used to ring customers every week and just ask those questions. What motivated you to buy? And what I think you've talked about this, but it's really valuable. Just kind of like, tell me the journey you went on to buy. Oh, I went to the vet. I tried this food. I've been at my wit's end for 6 months, etc., etc. And you paint that picture and you piece it all together. And now we've obviously got the tools to layer in all of that, where we've got the kind of like qual and quant data, and you can piece it all together and you can do clever things with AI. But that then leads you onto your MPD pipeline. So that's been kind of game changing for us. And there's loads of things. I'll be honest, we're at the tip of the iceberg, I think, with it. And there's loads of things that we've probably not done, which we are about to do, which probably can't say just yet, but we're really excited by it because it's just leaned into those things, which we think will make a massive impact on retention.
100%. Yeah, customer centricity is just so key, isn't it? It's so important. I think you forget just how much of an impact that can make. And even, you guys have obviously built some pretty strong tech on the back end to be able to enable that further. But for, younger businesses and brands, even as simple as calling up customers, getting feedback. Like, we do that for a few brands where we will literally just, ask the brands we work with for a list of customers' numbers, and we'll just give them a call and just ask them some questions, dig a bit deeper, and just really nurture that golden cohort as well. Like with my brand, like, again, that's just been so valuable, really nurturing those early customers, and just, they then become those true fans that can really help drive the brand forward.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. We did a lot of that, and we still do that. We still call customers today, and to really understand that. I would also say as well, we've built out a massive direct sales part of the business. But one thing I would really advocate, if you want to learn that, is, if you're in an early stage of a business, go and get a little gazebo or a little stand and try and sell it to people on the street. Not because maybe you don't want to scale it to, that becomes a channel in itself. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But you'll understand the objections immediately. Yeah. If you're trying to sell, and I did this in the early days. I spent 6 months before giving it to someone far better than me to scale that channel. I spent 6 months just physically stood there trying to sell to people. And do you have a dog? Come over here. What do you currently feed your dog? Going through the whole sales process. And you'll get told the reasons why people don't want to buy immediately. And that'd be something I'd advocate for.
I love that. Yeah, it's just objection handling in real time. I think it's something that, that's just old school sales, but we've kind of, we've moved so far away from that now that it feels alien. But I think that's a great idea. Guys, it's been so valuable. I guess, like, before we end, I love to ask, what is the future for the brand? Like, where is Pure Pet in 5 years' time? Where are you both?
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Obviously we've got a plan. We're something we work on quite a lot. We want to be a lot bigger. We are just looking at European expansion. We just launched in the Netherlands 2 months ago, so we'll be in Europe as that all goes well, a bit further on. And a bit of MPD product work that we're working on at the moment. That's really exciting. But yeah, I think just bigger and better, really. I think we've got obviously targets that are multiples of where we are now. So growth is revenues are North Star at the moment, which is just harks back to what we're bothered about now with growth. Mm-hmm. Anything you want to add to that?
I would say, I think we've got now, we're at a place in the business where we've got the structures, the flywheels are going. There's been probably much longer than most people who kind of understand the dynamics from the word go, but it took us a long time to get that flywheel going. And, people always say this, but it's really true, but the first million in turnover or the first 5 million is far harder than the next 10, 15, 20. And I feel like we've got a really good kind of like structure of teams, and we've got, we've managed to get the meta flywheel starting to scale. That's dead exciting. And we're now starting to, go international. We're thinking about other opportunities. We've got loads of product stuff coming up in the pipeline. So I think it's actually exceeded where I thought this business was going to go already. I think in my wildest dreams at the time, I thought if we can get to like a 30 million turnover, we've done unbelievably well. And now I sort of look at it now and think, actually, I think we're not even at the start. We could really scale this. So I think it's as exciting as it's ever been. And I think we've got a really good team behind us. And I think, to echo Joe's point, we've got some targets, but I actually feel like we've got the team behind it to go out and execute it. Now it's not just a kind of a, let's hope that'll happen and no idea of how we're going to do it. We've got a really clear really clear reasons to believe of why we should get there as well.
I love that. And you don't have to answer this, definitely don't need to tell me the timeline, but is there a timeline for an exit, or is it more based on once you hit a certain point?
I think the honest answer is it's nuanced. Is that question like how long I want to be in it? I don't want to do anything else. I actually really enjoy it. And me and Dan say this a lot, and I think Joe's probably in the same mindset of like, this is far better than going and getting a job. Like it's actually fun. And I get it's people's lives.
It's your baby.
And like, but it actually feels like, there's roles and responsibilities with it, but it's actually a really exciting place to be. I think the fact that we're doing something that changes dogs' lives and makes a good impact on society. As I've got older, that has become like a real big thing. Like I would never want to do a business that I feel that is not having a good impact. So I think that is something that is so hard to replicate. But I actually think when you get off the bus is like, I'd be really honest, I'm not sure. I know we want to get there, and whether I'm there for 10, 20, 30 years after that, it is probably up in the air. I think it's, you have to go into situations as soon as you take on venture funding with your eyes wide open. There is people going to be exiting the business at a certain stage, whether I do at that point or not. I don't think you'll know until you kind of get there. I think we definitely know that we're going to be on this journey for the next 5 years. After that, I think there's so many, I'm sure you've seen this play out enough times that there's so many possibilities of where that could go. But I think whilst we enjoy it, and it feels right now, and I think Joe would echo this, but it's so fun right now, especially this kind of like meta-crit, like there's people like running around with cameras every day, and everyone's being creative. It's like, it's exciting.
Yeah, and, absolutely.
I don't think I want it to stop for a while.
It's part of when you work with dogs. Like we obviously we've got a dog friendly office, so there's 10 dogs in our office every day. And from like every person you hire now has a dog because they want to work for Pure, because they know Pure likes dogs and they like dogs. And a lot of people's reason to join the business now is dogs. So when I joined, it was a tiny little factory where you couldn't have dogs in it. We got a dog just because we moved to a factory where we had a separate office that you could have dogs. That's the only reason we got a dog. And is a number of people, like a lot of people say, if you don't have a dog when you join Pure, you'll have a dog in 6 months. It's that kind of, it's a really nice kind of feeling of, we know we're doing a great product that is improving dogs' lives. It's a really great place to work, a great environment. Like, why wouldn't you want to keep going with it?
Yeah. And I think it's like, I'm such a believer of like purpose is much bigger than money at the end of the day. Like, you hear these stories all the time of people that exit a business and, they've got all the money in the world, but then they've lost their purpose in life. And as a result, they're much unhappier than they ever were before that. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Guys, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been really, really interesting. And I think loads of takeaways that the listeners can take away. But where can people find you? We'll put all the links below. But yeah.
Well, I would say if anyone wants to talk to us further about anything, or like wants to learn anything or share anything, hit us both up on LinkedIn. We're trying to make more contacts than ever. Do you know what I mean? It's a good thing for us to, like I say, we really like talking to other businesses. So if anyone wants to talk about anything, we're both on LinkedIn. Purepetfood.com for if you want to buy some pet food. I think that is there anywhere else?
No, I think those are the places. Yeah, I think Joe's right. I think we feel like we're made a real effort to be part of the community, and actually when you give, you get back. And we're looking at new channels now, and we've had so much feedback from like other companies who are doing these channels really well, and so we're always happy to kind of share. And I think feel free to add us on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Joe, Matt, thank you so much. I will see you on the next episode. I forgot to actually say at the start, but this is obviously episode 50. So thank you to all our listeners that have, been on this journey with us. Please make sure you subscribe if you haven't, like the video, follow us on Spotify and YouTube, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Lucas.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.